3, 2, 1.
All right, good. Sweet. Well, welcome to the Hdyh Health Podcast. Annie, welcome to the studio, and I'm excited to have a conversation with you. I think we talked about having this conversation a long time ago, maybe a year?
Almost a year.
Anyway, so this is Annie Yoder, and she's a great friend at this point. She is a human design guide. I like that term. But I've known you since you were in the Pilates world, and you used to own your own studio, and you sold that, and then you kind of had a little hiatus trying to figure out what you were going to do, and then you finally called me back or texted me about. I was like, okay, I'm ready to do a podcast because I know exactly what I want to talk about. So it seems like you've dove in now and you learned about this subject, and I'm new to it. I told you this before, that I had someone else read my human design before, and then it was just one of those things that they explained some things, but it didn't mean much to me. But then I did it with you, and we uncovered so much more. And then I think you said that you kind of read over my human design right before you came over.
I did, yeah.
Okay. So let's start with this. Let's start with a little bit of a history and what is human design.
Yeah, well, it's really a pleasure to be here in this awesome new studio and all your gear and gadgets and lights. The human design system is a synthesized body of knowledge that integrates ancient esoteric information, including the Chinese I Ching, the Jewish Kabbalah, the Hindu chakra system, and it integrates it with some exoteric knowledge like biochemistry, our genetics. There was a revelation that the founder had in 1987. His name's Ra Uru. And what he found was that there's an almost exact mathematical parallel between the frequencies of this 5,000-year-old text of the I Ching and our DNA. There's 64 channels in the I Ching, 64 codons in our DNA, 6 lines per channel, and then 6 amino acids per codon. And it's this perfect formula of all of these channeled bodies of knowledge and the scientific knowledge that we have about our makeup currently. And so it all integrates into this map, basically. It's a body graph that I look at that tells me your life path, your purpose, what are the energies within you that are consistent, how are you designed to operate, and where are you open to being conditioned by your environment. And so through studying the information, it's a process of learning to decondition your programming in a way that's not you, shedding those things, and then surrendering into the core of who you are and the way that you're designed to operate.
So because it's almost like there is a design, but it doesn't necessarily, it's more of what I'm asking you is this correct? Is more of like, it's just what, maybe even some habits that you would fall into easier than like new ones that you're trying to build because you've designed a certain way. And yeah, you can create these other habits. Maybe they take a little bit more work, but if you're aware of the fact that it's going to take a little bit more work, then maybe at least you're more open to continuing the work. Maybe, I don't know. Yeah.
And sometimes in the ways that we develop ourselves are completely contrary to how we're designed to operate, and can actually be, despite our best intentions, can actually be hindering us on our road to progress or success or satisfaction in life. So in certain, I'll say, spiritual studies that we do, it's okay, let me try to be a kind person. Let me try to be this way and kind of take it on mentally, and then and try to embody this way of being that isn't natural to us. And human design says, no, there's no effort required in being this design. It's actually about surrendering, undoing everything that isn't you. And when you surrender into what's already there, then all of this intelligence really comes to the surface and guides you in your path to success.
Like this innate intelligence.
Yeah.
Right? Like it's almost, how can you tap into that energy, right? So how old is this, what would you call it, a system?
Yeah.
Okay. How old is this system?
It was discovered in 1987. So.
What's interesting though about it is that it's only really the study of really old traditions as well too, though, right? Is that correct? Or
right, yeah, it's a modern take on some of those older systems.
Yeah, so we had a conversation last week with Rachel from Kurkuma. I don't know if you know her, and we were talking about Ayurvedic stuff, right? And it just like how food is medicine. I mean, even today we had a lunch and learn with Fayez, and he's the CEO of Prep to Your Door, and we talked about changing the food system because like food is your medicine and all that stuff. But these are things that have always been talked about in traditions that are thousands of years old, and then science now is catching up in a sense, right? Because, well, and to tie those two things together, I just finished reading this book called Psychoenergetic Science, and it's like the science, and there's physics in there and trigonometry and all that stuff, and luckily, like, I understand like some of that math, so I imagine that. Are you looking at any mathematics or like formulas when you're studying this? Or I know it's part of the system, but are you looking at any of that?
At this level, that's way beyond my pay grade,
Cool. Okay.
but hopefully several years from now, I'll be able to go that deep into it.
But it's a big part of it, right? Like it's and it's interesting because I didn't run into human design in this book, which I figured that it would, because I do remember you saying something about there being some sort of scientific or mathematics in our first conversation that we had about it, and I figured like I'm probably going to run into this, but it was what it really came down to. This book was really about the science and the mathematics of manifestation, right? And then whenever we looked at like human design, there is a thing about like whether you're a certain type, like a manifestor. So let's talk about the different types that you can be or cannot be. Which ones are more prevalent than others?
Right.
Yeah.
So there are reflectors, which are 1% of the population, very rare. Projectors, about 20%. Manifestors, 9% of the population, and then 70% of the population are generators or manifesting generators.
Okay.
So the type is based off your aura. We all have a way that our electromagnetic field works. It extends about 3 to 4 feet around us. Some of us, so generators, for example, which is most of us, we have this open, enveloping aura that just magnetizes life. It draws life to us. And manifestor is here to carve their own path. They actually have a repelling aura. They're because that repelling clears the path for them to initiate, to make things happen. And
because you're not taking other space that already exists.
Yeah. So for generators being open, because life comes in, you're a generator, I'm a manifesting generator. So for us, life just comes in and our only responsibility is to respond. So the motto for a generator is do not initiate, because what can happen is we start initiating before something has come into our field, and that's where we encounter more resistance, more friction in life. We get out of flow when we make decisions with our head and start initiating before it's time. So there is that higher intelligence that is drawing life to us, and our response comes from our sacral center, the gut feeling, where we've all had the like knots in the gut, or this feeling of this energized feeling of like you almost want to run towards something, or it can be little guttural sounds like or
Yeah.
And so this context that we're in a podcast, for example, is perfect generator setting because we get to respond back and forth through conversation. Whereas a manifestor could probably just, turn on the camera, run a webinar or something. They don't need to respond. But this is such a great setting for generators to ping pong back and forth.
Interesting. I know that. So John's wife, Merrick, she started getting into human design, and she was geeking out about it. Their son is a he's a manifestor.
Okay.
But not a manifestor generator. I think just manifestor.
Mm-hmm.
So that's really interesting because I love the idea of manifesting, but I do find that Well, because everything that I've learned as far as manifesting is to like set the intention, picture it, and then just let it happen, right? Kind of like just forget about it. Like don't initiate it. Just don't worry about it. Because if anything, it's the opposite. Whenever I do try to like, I don't want to say force it, but when I do try to initiate, it's more work as opposed to like just setting the intention and letting things happen.
Wow.
But is that not initiating, just the fact that I'm setting an intention?
Not at all. That's perfectly appropriate. That's a great example of what it means to manifest as a generator, because the concept of manifesting isn't exclusive to the manifestor type. It's just that, yes, when we surrender to that higher intelligence within us, and just like how you're setting intentions, as you become more attuned to the higher order of things in your own path, then your intentions and what you're manifesting starts to sync up with the universe's intentions for you. And that synchro destiny begins to unfold. And that's where you're really in flow.
That's awesome. Okay, that makes more sense, because I did have that question that I wanted to ask, because I'm like, that's something that I do practice a lot.
Yeah.
Because I remember talking to, and this is when I had forgotten exactly what it was. I was talking to Allison. She's actually the person that started this podcast, and she's like, you have to be a manifestor or something, because like you're always just like saying things and they happen. And I was like, but I just usually say them and I don't, make them happen. But even today we were having a conversation about changing the food system, and it went around the room after this great conversation between John and Fayez, and people was like, what did you get out of it? And I was like, well, I got this and I got that. Like, I didn't know that this, and I didn't know that there were so much subsidies, and like there was so much different opinions about what was heard during the talk. And for me, when it got to me, it's like, what did you learn? She's like, well, I'm just inspired, because like I don't like playing those games. Like whatever games do exist, I prefer to just create a new game. So I'm just inspired to figure out like, well, what is the new game that needs to be played, because that's where I want to play, right? And I want to let that flow to me, and then make that happen, because I don't know what the answer is. Like, if I knew what the answer was, then someone would already be playing that game. But most of the time it's like, even with our business, it's like it's happening, and there's like, oh, I need to evolve this a little bit more, because it's something, right? And it's really interesting to see that, how that could work. But there's channels, right? So in the whole system, what are those about?
The channels. So the moment that you're born, there's an imprint in your design. It's, you're born in this moment in time in the grand scheme of the universe. And so talking about the mathematical formulas that exist within us and exist throughout the whole universe, there's these patterns that happen. So you can look at a point in time when someone is born and see, okay, here's kind of the map of how their life is meant to unfold based off these formulas. So in that moment, there are certain transits with the planets, and the position that they're in create this design, create your imprint of your design, and they correlate with certain channels of the I Ching. So depending on which gate the planets are in, they'll activate certain ones. So those gates that are active in your chart are consistent within you throughout your life.
Okay.
There's also an unconscious design, which is 88 days before you're born, which is when the soul enters the body. And then same thing in that moment, it creates an imprint. So we have the conscious and the unconscious, and our life is a path of merging the two, integrating it all into our whole being.
That's really interesting. So, okay. So then let me see if I can connect some dots here, because from the book, right, there's the emotion, there's even the emotional. The way that the book references all this is dimensions, and the spirit being the ultimate dimension that we're all a part of, right? But we all have a spirit, and then there's the physical as well. But there's the emotional, and then there's also what's the other thing that you just talked about? So so there's a physical, the emotional, the spiritual. I'm missing something here. But anyways, it talks about like there's this thing called deltrons that he kind of just makes up because there needs to be something that transcends all those dimensions. And then when you talked about gates, that's the way that you just explained that, it just brought me to that, because he talks about like there has to be something that creates this pathway, so maybe a gate that can connect the different dimensions, the physical with the emotional with the, and then as you become more aware, then there's got to be a way, because and then there's mathematics on all this. The thing that the Deltrons don't actually exist, but the mathematics of them, if they exist, all plays a part of like this would work. We just can't prove it because these things would travel technically faster than the speed of light, so there's no way that we could detect them in a sense, or at least to this day. Right, but then there's tons of research that he's doing. He's a scientist, and so to prove all these things, but it's all based with intentions. The idea that with an intention, it still has an energetic imprint, or or footprint. And if there's energy, and energy equals mass, then a thought can be energy, or an intention can be energy, which can create thought or mass, which means that in the physical world, it would become a manifesting activity, or an activity that has been manifested in a sense. But the spirit, where do you think that comes from? That's my question. What do you think? Where do you think the spirit comes from?
Where does the spirit come from?
Yeah.
Well, it's a fun inquiry. I can't say that I have any fixed ideas about that.
Yeah, it's weird, right? Because it's not that it's weird. It's obviously a thing. I don't know where even to go with that, but that's a question that I'm just like, I get it, that there is a part of that. Like, I don't think that because there's obviously a physical form, but there's something else way beyond that.
Yeah.
And it's cool to see different systems or different projects or even different ideas that are trying to and succeeding at it. And we're getting closer to understanding exactly how that is or why that is in a sense.
Yeah.
Right.
I mean, I really enjoy diving into the mystery of the self and spirit, and being kind of a personality junkie of sorts throughout my life, like studying all these other systems, like the Big Five and Enneagram and Myers-Briggs. There's something very different about this system with the frequencies, because there's one way of taking in self-knowledge. When you take these kinds of assessments, things, it's like, okay, my personality is like this, and you can start to resonate with it. Like, yeah, I see myself in that. But then when you go really deeper into the frequencies with human design and the I Ching, it's like these qualities have a life of their own that express themselves through you. It's not just, oh, I see myself in these qualities, but there's actually something alive within me that when I surrender, let go of my mind and how I think my life should look, or how I think I should be, surrender that, and then there's this intelligence that's doing its own thing in me, and I'm just kind of in the passenger seat while it drives and takes me to the right place at the right time, meet the right people. And there's just a whole other dimension of living when you allow that to express itself through you.
Yeah, and it's fun, right? Because it's almost like an adventure of like, okay, I'm starting to understand what that is, but I'm just going to ride it along. And then you can manipulate it a little bit here and there, because you get to learn what that game is. And I'd always like to think about things in terms of games, because I feel like math is a game. It's always like, well, there's only one answer. You can only pass it. You can only pass that game a certain way. So whenever there's a lot of math involved with something, I just geek out on it. How do you feel, or actually, this is not a feeling question. This is more, is this being used at all now, like in like corporate world? Because we talked about Myers-Briggs, all that stuff gets used all the time. Does this get used now?
As well, it's currently rising in popularity. As far as I know, I think there are individual analysts, practitioners who might be running their business in that way, working with corporations. But I can't speak too far into that. I'm not sure.
Like, it hasn't necessarily been adopted yet, kind of deal. What's your favorite part about it?
Great question. I really enjoy being able to look at a chart and just in an instant knowing so much about a person. So it's really helped me with deepening intimacy in my life, not only because I know myself, and in the face of being challenged, I'm more secure, can maintain my personal identity and integrity in a way that wasn't available to me before. Well, it was available, but I wasn't accessing it. And then in knowing other people in my life, whether they know their design or not, I understand how to interact with them in a way that brings us closer together. And that's been really beautiful in my relationships.
That's awesome. Yeah, I mean, let me ask you this. So, no, let's go back for a second here. How did you first come up to this? Like, come up to human design? How did you come into it?
A bit of an identity crisis. When I closed my Pilates studios, I had been in the industry since I was 15 or 16. A huge part of my identity was merged with my business. And there was just this pressure building in me for the last year or so of running it that was telling me there's something else. I don't know what it is, but I have to move on. And so I kind of unknowingly was following that frequency in me that was saying, oh, we're going on a different path now, and not knowing what the outcome would be. But after closing the studios, there was a sense of, who am I now without
the business?
Yeah. And so a lot of my friends were telling me, you have to get a reading with Barbara Ditlow, who's my mentor. She's studied under the founder. She's been doing this for 20 years. So after one reading, I was so I had to go deeper, and I had the opportunity to study under her.
Well, I remember when I first met you, it was a dance party, of course. And you had just closed your places. I mean, you have that conversation of like, what do you do kind of deal? And your answer was more like, well, I'm just kind of doing my own thing right now, because I did do this before, but now I'm kind of not doing that. And then shortly after that, you had a more specific answer of I'm going to go do that. This thing is calling me, right? And then even recently, right? It wasn't even until we had this conversation of why we're going to sit down now, was more no, this is it. I'm this is exactly what I need to be doing.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. What is that feeling like?
It's such a relief to have clarity. And I've actually been training a few of my favorite clients out of my home, Pilates clients.
Oh, nice.
And it's been very interesting to integrate the two, because a lot of what had me, as much as I really appreciate the Pilates method, what was missing for me was going deeper. And it was a rehabilitative studio, so a lot of injury rehab, and just seeing the same patterns over and over, especially with back pain. And I just knew there's so much more than the physical body that I wanted to explore and expand my scope of professional expertise to be able to go there with people. And most of the time, our physical pain lies beneath the physical body. And so to be able to look at this, to look at a chart and see, oh, I see where you would be attracted to using your energy in a way that is incompatible with your design. And we can start to inquire into that and then find out, wow, this person has been conditioned to live away from how they're designed to operate. And it's causing all kinds of conflicts in their life, and it's showing up in the physical body.
So now let me ask you this. You said what was it? Projector was 1% or something like that?
Reflector.
Mm-hmm. And so once again, that's something that you're born with. So maybe this question is incorrect. So does that have to do anything with society's a certain way? Let's see if this question makes sense. Kind of if you're left-handed, you're born left-handed, right? But everything's right-handed, so it's almost you're at a disadvantage.
Absolutely.
Does that have to do anything with that? The fact that there's less of that they're not projected in a certain way, or that they're not being evolved in a certain way, or that they just don't become projecting, or no, because you're born that way or not?
If they evolve a certain way.
Meaning if you are, let's say I was born a projector. But because society is not conditioned a certain way, there's no way that I'll ever develop more as a projector, so I become this other thing.
I see. Yeah, absolutely.
Okay.
And that's the value of spreading this information and us knowing how we're designed, because then we can continue living that. And when we're questioned about how, the way that we operate, we're not filled with self-doubt and try to be any way that we're not. Projectors especially deal with being misunderstood because they're designed to be more passive and wait to be recognized and be invited in. So they're very, very wise people, very powerful guides, and they spend a lot of their time studying and gaining knowledge and skills, and a lot of times it goes unnoticed. But for the people who notice, then they can give them the invitation to come in and use their talents to benefit, a team, relationship, benefit anything. So, but from the outside looking in, it's just, what are you doing? You're not using your energy. You're not hustling. You're
being lazy. Whatever, right?
Yeah.
Like, it's interesting.
Mm-hmm.
It's interesting how we put judgment on stuff, right? Like, that's just a very common thing, because how do you get, even as a guide, right? Like, you say, like, well, I can understand people a little bit better. I would imagine that it could also be easy to jump into, like, now I'm judging people a certain way. Like, maybe someone that's a less developed teacher, right? Or something like that. Do you think is that a possibility?
It might be. For me, I find that the more, I'm such an analytical person, the more that I understand, the less I judge.
Nice.
It really frees me of that. Because I can be very judgmental sometimes. And I notice that happens the less that I understand, then all my negativity or pessimism can come in. But this allows me to have so much acceptance for how people operate.
That's interesting. And so does that come from you trying to figure out what it is that they are or not are, but how they are, and you start to build judgments because of that? Or is it more of like a safety mechanism?
Yeah, there's probably some just like, whatever my ego likes to do to keep me from being loving.
The ego does interesting things for us in the scope of like trying to protect us, right? And sometimes it's like, from what?
Yeah, totally.
Well, like, what's going? Just tell me what's going on. I wish it would work that way. That's really interesting. So then, let me ask you this: where do you see this going from now on? Like 5 years from now, where do you see yourself doing with this work?
Yeah. Well, what I think makes a powerful world is when we are freeing ourselves from homogenization, and when we have that self-understanding and self-acceptance. A lot of times I give readings and people are saying, yes, I already knew those things about me, but I buried them so deep down and stopped accepting how I am. And so this is something that has been offering people self-acceptance. When we accept ourselves, then we're free to live out our individuality. When we're living out our individuality and our design, then we're spending our energy and our talents in a way that's impactful on the world and humanity, because all of us are designed to help evolve our world. No one's designed to be angry or bitter or hateful or ugly, and we all have a purpose here. So in spreading this information, that's the possibility for our world, is that we're all aligned with our purpose, and it's unfolding naturally in a way that there's flow and brings us peace and satisfaction in life and elevates our world.
That's beautiful. I'm going to go back to that book again, because he talks a lot about the spirit being the thing, and the thing that like keeps growing. Like that the spirit is always growing. It can always be growing, and we can get into some of the physics of how that can relate to why the universe is always expanding, and how black holes are always expanding, and like there's some weird science there too that I'm not going to get into because that's not what this is about. But what's really interesting is that there's a concept that says because the spirit is always expanding, our job in a sense, it's always like to create infrastructure for that. We can create infrastructure by like reading more books, because now I have more capacity to understand more, and the spirit in a sense can grow more from that sense. But even from the sense of like everything needs infrastructure in order to continue to grow, we can apply that to even like, well, of course you need good infrastructure for a building to stay up for a long time, and then in a sense the spirit can grow that way too, because now there's more community and there's more blah blah blah, right? Like all that stuff. But when it comes to like the infrastructure of like a system like this, and continuing to gain knowledge, well, that could be the basis, right? Because it's a lot of times we're just so blinded to what's really going on, and it's just like a program running, and then there's no evolution there.
Yeah.
Right.
Absolutely.
And so I love that there's always like different ways to figure out how am I, why am I that way, what are some changes that I can be implemented so we can continue to grow together, and spreading the messages is always great, right?
Yeah.
Because it helps so much. Let's get into a little bit of my design, just because I know we're a little bit familiar with it, and this will be a fun little exercise. Generator.
Mm-hmm.
There's a 3-5 in there, I think.
Mm-hmm.
What does that even mean?
Mm-hmm.
There's a 3-5 generator. Is that correct?
Yep, you got it. So there are 12 profiles. So your profile is 3-5, which is the martyr heretic.
Martyr heretic.
Yes. So so the 3, this is about how your path to gaining your intelligence in life is all about trial and error, kind of bumping into things, going up and down the staircase. What's on level 1, what's on level 2, and adapting. And sometimes in your trial and error, you just run straight for the brick wall and fall down, and you get back up and you say, that was the wrong way. Let's go this way.
Yeah.
And so for other people watching you, it's like, Baldo, you could have done this. Like, this would have been the efficient path. Just do it like that. And you're like, no, I have to try it this way. And so you cover a lot of ground in your life. Yeah. I have this conversation with John all the time, which is why we create a perfect balance in our job. I don't know what his is. I'd be interested to know. But because I'm saying, yes, you're right. Like, I'm just like, well, listen, we're doing this, and if it doesn't work, it's fine. We'll just try it another way. It's not a big deal, because it's not a big deal for me. As opposed to, like, he likes to think about it, and like let's kind of gauge and like where we're going. And so there's a balance, because if we leave it up to him, then we're waiting all the time, and if you leave it up to me, then we're just like bumping into walls, right? And so there's always like a give and take, right? Like, you're probably right. Like, thank you for holding me back. But can we try it this other way? And then there's usually a way that he will try, because not only will I'm okay with running into the wall, I'm okay with running into any of the walls, right? So it's like, if you don't agree with this one, then we'll just go run into this wall, or maybe that wall or that wall, because there's plenty of walls to run into. I get that, but because I need to be moving, like I have to, like, there else, like, what am I doing? Yeah.
And I can't, there is a lot of peacetime for me. Like, I read a lot, I journal a lot. But as soon as I'm done with that, I was like, that means I'm a little more prepared to try something else.
Yeah.
That's what it is.
And you're designed to make decisions more quickly. So you have a splenic and a sacral definition, which means that how you make decisions is very instinctual and can be very fast. And if you take too long, then you get in your head and your mind starts to come in. You can second guess it. You could end up going the wrong way. But I think we mentioned Jonathan's an emotional authority. I haven't seen his chart, but I think maybe you mentioned that to me.
Well, he is, but I don't remember what his chart is.
Right. Okay. So how our decision-making authorities can really determine how we move through decisions. So if his is emotional, people with emotional authority have to sleep on things. They have to take their time. And so in a business partnership, it's interesting to see how you two interact with that and how you find compromise. Some people just surrender to the person with the emotional authority because they take longer. And sometimes vice versa.
Well, he told me one time, he was like, are you okay? I mean, are you scared of being wrong? I was like, no, I just want to be wrong, like, now, so that I can start working on the right way, like tomorrow, right? Because I don't want to wait to be wrong 2 days or 3 days from now. I want to be wrong now, so I can, like, start working on the next thing. So it's never, because I don't really ever see that. It's more of, like, learning opportunities. It's really how I see things. Like, I never really see, like, oh, I failed at that. I was like, no, how I learned one way not to do that. And it applies so well for business, I think, because, like, like that's why we have multiple businesses, because it's like, okay, well, we keep doing that. Why don't we just do it better? Because I'd rather just do that and save some money.
That's amazing.
Okay, so then what else is interesting? Because you and I had the conversation about like love and relationships.
Yeah.
And I don't want to put words in your mouth, but like how I've struggled with like finding like a partner in the long time, and I don't remember what it was though.
Right. Well, I'll finish with this 3-5 because there are a lot of people who are 3-5s out there who might relate to this. But so the 3 is trial and error. The 5 is you're here to universalize information, and it's all about being out around strangers and in society and communities. And the 5 comes with a projection field, which can tie into the relationship thing too, because people will project all kinds of things onto you. And most of all, what people can project onto you is that you're a savior, or you're the most intelligent, the best this or that, like putting you on a pedestal. And so in a romantic relationship, that obviously can be problematic when someone is seeing you that way, and then eventually they come to recognize your humanity, and then there can be disappointment because of a misunderstanding.
Sure, okay.
And so in community groups as well, that can be the case. So you're meant to universalize information, be out in communities, but then once you've made your impact, move on before everyone starts to get disappointed when they see you as who you really are.
Sure.
Yeah.
Okay. No, that makes sense. And I'm totally cool with that, because I love just moving on to the next thing, right? Like it's like, okay, there's
perfect.
Well, I never feel like I'm the best at anything. I always feel like I'm the best at like getting things started with the proper infrastructure, and then someone else can just take over, because then I become bored. That's the way I see it. I just become bored, and it's like, well, it's already done. Like, I mean, someone can make it prettier, someone can make it nicer, someone can make it like whatever, but like, I'm no longer interested. I want something new that I can work from scratch, that I can create from scratch. Is usually how I feel about things. So I don't know how that's
brilliant.
How that plays into role into anything.
Sounds like it really supports you in being effective.
Yeah, I mean, it works for me, and I'm sure, because I was just thinking about that. We were having that conversation. I was like, well, when I feel inspired about the new game that we're playing, and I have mentioned this before, but now it makes a little bit more sense from this conversation and from that conversation, that like I want to build the new health insurance, and it won't be based on what health insurance is like now. It's not like I'm trying to build a company within that system. I'm trying to create a whole new system, and I'm willing to let that inspiration flow through me however it needs to flow, because I'm not going to think about the answer, because I'm only going to think about things that I know of, and this answer requires something that I don't know. Is how I feel about it.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's amazing.
So I don't know how that plays a role. So 3-5 is a big thing. I think it's a common thing.
Yeah, I want to say 12% of the population or so. So it's fairly common. Yeah.
Okay, cool.
Yeah. So in the relationship, so you and I share something that my mentor calls the Heartbreak Hotel.
That's right.
Yeah.
I remember you said that.
Yeah. So there are three of our chakra centers that are open, which means that they're not consistent in the way they operate in us. And so we take in other people's energy and can amplify it or distort it. And what can happen with that is we can merge so easily. We can merge our identity with a person or career or a community, which is a beautiful part of how we can create intimacy wherever we go. And people can see themselves in us really easily. And but what can come with that is deeper inside us is an open ego center. So there's something in there that says, I have to prove myself. I'm not a good lover unless I prove it. I'm not a good colleague unless I prove it, or whatever it is that I have to do something to prove my worth. And that can be dangerous in relationships, to have that belief running you. So 60.
Well, I feel like business owners run into that a lot, right? Like, I need to prove it. Like this, what is it called? Like this, imposter syndrome. Almost like I need it. Like, I'm not good enough. Like I haven't, even though like I'm running whatever, right? Like, I mean, we see it. There's a couple of guys here that run like billion-dollar companies, and they come in here and they have the same exact problem. So like, it's like, I just feel like I'm not good enough and whatever, and they're having these conversations with us in a clinic. They're not here to have emotional support in a sense. I mean, they get it, but that's not what we do.
Right.
That's just what we do because we're humans, and we're okay with that, right? Like, whatever you need, we'll support that, but we're not psychiatrists by any sense, or psychologists, or like, that's not our work. But we understand that there's human connection is important.
Right. Absolutely.
But I did cut you off, so what were you saying?
Yeah. I mean, that tendency to overcompensate if you're not being conscious of that thought pattern coming up. And then emotionally, this is the most important thing when I look at a relationship composite chart or do a relationship reading, is how are they meant to operate emotionally? So half of the population, you and I, are what's called non-emotional. There's this kind of analytical intelligence and emotional control that allows us to be dispassionate.
Okay.
And then the other half of the population, they're very warm and fuzzy and attractive and magnetic, and there's just this emotional vibrancy about them, and they're passionate when they speak. And so they're very attractive to us, but they just operate so differently. And there's this chemistry in their body that's just a little bit different than us, where they take in information that goes through this emotional wave. Sometimes the wave is high, sometimes the wave is low. And so they're either feeling really great about something or they're feeling really down. And the great thing about us being open is we can be around someone who's riding high on their wave and feeling amazing, and we're going to feel twice as amazing. We amplify the emotional field around us. But as soon as they're down on their wave, we're going to feel twice as down. And so not only is it destabilizing, but we don't have the chemistry in our body to discharge the energy like people who are, I call it the wave, like people who are on the wave. So then that develops problems in our nervous system and our digestive system. It starts to affect our health when we can't complete the emotional cycles. And it's not even ours. We just take it on and then start to think, oh, something's wrong with me. And then there's a tendency to withdraw, like not speak up, not share your needs, because you don't want to rock the boat. And so you're walking on eggshells. And that can just lead to some unhealthy patterns in relationship.
Yeah, well, because then communication, well, first of all, you run into the part where like you don't want to say anything, then you're already breaking some communication patterns that are always very beneficial, like communication in general. I was doing this thing with my coach the other day, and we were making a list about different conversations. No. It just came out that the solution to a lot of that was just conversations that I needed to have. And I was like, well, it just comes back to communication, right? Because we tend to make up all these stories and we get in our head if we're not, or at least like you just mentioned, like if you're not acting on something and you're thinking about it, or you're waiting, then I'm just thinking about it too much, right? And I can see how that could apply to that. And, okay, cool. That's awesome. So then obviously it's something that you've implementing, maybe even like, does it affect the way that you date now and all that? I mean, yeah. Yeah,
absolutely. I can pretty much know right away, okay, where's the conflict going to happen, how to handle it, for the most part. Because we all still have conditioning, so it's not like I think I know everything about the dynamic, but it just offers so much clarity. And, I've learned that for me, I can be the most chill person when I'm on my own. And then when I'm with someone who's more emotionally up and down, I lose it. I can't stabilize myself in an intimate relationship like that. And so it's a lens that I kind of see my dating life through, where I know, okay, this is going to work for me or it's not. Yeah.
So then is there an aspect of you or anyone that's seeing their chart where you think, okay, well, I want to work on that part of myself, or is it not, or is it counterintuitive to do that because you're just going to work double to try to fix something that's not fixable in a sense?
So
like I want to be more this way.
right.
You know, I don't want to be as emotional. I don't want to like how can I like, because then you talked about people talk about like having emotional intelligence or not, right? And it's like, can you work on that? Or not?
Absolutely.
Or do you just accept it? And it's like, well, that's how I am. And then
I think there's always a balance with that. That's a great question that I think everyone should inquire into. At what point do I accept myself, and at what point do I keep pushing for change? Because both extremes can be detrimental. So, you know, if I just say, well, this is the way I am, then that's being victimized and not being empowered to create yourself in your life in the way that you can. And then on the other hand, if it's, no, I constantly want to change and grow and improve for the sake of not accepting myself the way I am, then there's a lack of self-love and self-understanding there. So I think for every person, it's tuning into their own inner authority to know what's correct for them in terms of what to accept and what to change. And relationships are such a powerful vehicle for that, because it's a relationship, you know, isn't supposed to make you happy. We have the happiness first, but a relationship is there to make you aware, and it can make you aware of what you can't change in another person specifically.
Yeah.
So
there's a lot of reflection constantly happening.
Oh my God, yeah. Yeah. So for people on the emotional wave, for example, it is their superpower to be able to take in information in the way that they do and express themselves. Boy, when they use their voice, they have so much impact that they can sell anything. They're the most powerful salespeople because there's that emotional resonance and
the passion. Right?
Yeah. And when people can't feel you emotionally, they're not sure if they can trust you.
Correct.
So it's beautiful, and they go through the highs and lows so they can come out of these experiences with learning, with wisdom, and be able to express the joys and sorrows of being alive. And that's what brings humanity together. It invites a kind of empathy and connection that the dispassionate person doesn't have as much access to.
Yeah, no, that completely makes. I mean, yes, you're right. Like the passion sells.
Yeah.
You know, and you know, I see it here all the time, right? Sometimes it's like you're saying all the right things, you're just like not even putting a smile on your face, and it's not going to be received as well, right? Like as far as from a sales standpoint, and yeah, so that definitely is very, very, very interesting to hear it that way. Okay, sweet.
And I was thinking about Eckhart Tolle and his work, The Power of Now. So he's talked about. From his perspective, women who experience PMS, he says, have, my own words, like a closer access to God, basically. Because whenever we're confronted with trigger or feeling dissatisfied, feeling uncomfortable emotionally, there's an opportunity there to go deeper and deeper into the present now that is beyond the experience that you're having, to be able to access that inner peace within that is deeper than the negativity that's arising in you. That's where you have that access to the deep now, where everything is well. And so to take that concept into human design with people on the wave, it's the same thing. You know, you can be feeling so on top of the world one day, and the next day you're down in the dumps and you don't even know why, or you're trying to figure out the cause. You go to therapy and try to figure out, why am I feeling this way? And there is no cause, because it's a chemistry in your body. It's just something that happens. And so to accept that, get out of your head and go into your body and go deeper into that present awareness of the now, it gives you that access to deep inner peace, that because you get confronted, that sustainable joy is just right there into your fingertips at any moment. It's really beautiful.
Yeah. What do you picture in your head whenever you think of, like, well, if I say the word joy, what's the picture that you get? I'm
seeing I'm seeing myself in nature under the sun and just like in this surrendered open body position. Like every cell is just being filled with sunlight.
Yeah, that's awesome. I always think of a smile.
Also,
Oh no, bliss. And with a little bit of bliss under my tongue, right? Yeah, well, why not? Like that's part. I always think of a smile, right? Like, and I did this exercise with my coach the other day, and this came up, and it's just an important thing because so many times. Oh, I was getting to the fact that we put different labels to words, right? Because even with joy, like I think of a smile, right? And so, and not necessarily anybody's smile. Like it's not like I see a face with the smile. I just basically see a smile whenever I think of the word joy. And then we talked about deep connection and what do you see that, and some people think about it one way. I just kind of see two hearts merging with two like silhouettes that are blue, and we were trying to make a connection on there, like how do you view this or that, because we tend to put different meanings to so many different words, and a lot of times that gets confused with the way it's portrayed in society, right? Because I mean, we talked about a little bit about that, like society goes a certain way and then it's conditioned a certain way, and then you're kind of stuck with that, having to deal with that, and acceptance is key, but then like I said, not completely surrendering to the fact that that's how it's going to be and whatnot, because like in our world, genetics, right? People come in here all the time, they're like, well, it's because it's in my genes and I'm gonna get cancer. I was like, well, that's not necessarily true. Just because it's in your genes doesn't mean that you're gonna get cancer. But a lot of people think that way, and it's like genetics in a sense is just a way that it is more likely that it can happen if you do certain things, carry a certain lifestyle, and if those lifestyles support that those genetics express themselves in a certain way, you're just more likely to make that a fact. But you don't have to live that lifestyle. And that genetics, that gene doesn't have to express itself in that way, right? So, so is there a lot of that coaching with you? Like as far as like, look, this is what you're designed, but this is how you can I don't want to say like this is how you avoid that, but it's more like these are the things that you need to be aware of, right? Like is that how you would approach it?
I haven't really encountered these types of conversations. Boy, I know a lot of women though who say I'm not having children because I have bad genes, and there's just a very quick dismissal around that. So, well, and I think a lot of it is I oftentimes don't speak to the genetic part of human design when I'm sharing about someone's design. So I think there's also just a lack of awareness of how that carries forward through your design. But I look at my parents' charts and I have exactly half of my dad, exactly half of my mom. Like I can see our whole family, how we all link together through it, which is very cool.
Oh, you're talking about your what's called your human design charts? Interesting.
Yeah, but I don't know in terms of cautioning people about what might be.
What's more of like maybe not even cautioning, but is any part of the coaching saying like, look, just because your human design is a certain way, like these are the things. And because maybe this is not obviously, this might not even be your part of it because it's ultimately it's up to them what they want to work on or not work on. But is any of the coaching part where it's like because of this, then you're more likely to have these type of expressions or and I'm talking about human connection expressions and or just living expressions as opposed to like genetics, right? Because genetics is just a very deep field,
right?
But I guess my question is more from the sense of, is there any similarity in that where it's like, hey, like just because your genes are a certain way, just because your design is not a certain way, it doesn't mean that you have to be this way.
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, some people with like one of the main points I look at when I see how they interact with other people is how they use their voice or not. And some people will either be dominated by other people and never feel heard, or they'll be the ones like always feeling like they have to interrupt conversations or talk over people and in order to feel like they're getting attention or being seen. And so, there can be some caution around that. Hey, just so you know, people notice you. But also there's the ability for deeper wisdom when people struggle with stuff like that. Well, the person who talks over people or feels like I'm never heard, everyone talks over me, they're constantly faced with questions in their conversations. Should I speak now? What should I say? How can I say this in a way people will understand? Whereas the rest of the population don't think, we just talk. and so there's a beauty within that lean into those questions that maybe occurs to you as anxiety about speaking, because then you start to resolve those questions and then you become very wise about speaking, and you can be one of the most powerful public speakers out there. And so, yeah, there are weaknesses like that, but we can always turn those into a strength.
Yeah, you just have to lean into them a little bit, right? Because I do remember me being that way in a sense where I was like, I just don't, should I say, like I want to say something because I feel like I need to say something. And then at some point someone mentioned something like, hey man, you're just a silent leader, and that's totally cool. And I mean, I host a podcast, so obviously I do like to talk. But I've also studied like how can I become a better interviewer, right? Like that's because it's not a natural thing for me. Like John can get in here, you guys can talk all day long, and he didn't have to think about what questions I'm going to ask, or like how should I, what's the system. Even in sales, like John says all the time, like Paul's the best salesperson ever. But at the beginning of it all, like I had to remember 5 or 6 questions that will help me start a proper conversation, right? Like, I would go into an appointment or talk to someone, and at first it was really weird because I was like, I have another question for you. Like, and it's like, what? Can you show me your pictures, right? And because I was told like, hey, if people start talking about pictures and people that they love, they're like, you're gonna build connection. I was like, oh, sweet, I can do that, right? And it's like, and then ask about like, is there any travel plans going on? And then I'd be like, hold on, like I'd open up my phone. It's like, oh yeah, are you guys like traveling anytime soon, right? And so it was very weird, but they were still interactive with me because at least I did ask, and then at some point it just became a natural thing, right? But it took a while, right? But and so I don't even know if that's even part of my design or not, but I do understand that like I embrace that, right? Like that's not naturally who I am. Sometimes I invite John's to parties to John because like I want to be at the party, but I don't really want to talk to anybody. And if I bring John, he'll talk to everyone, and so that way I can just kind of like stay back and I can just chime in whenever I need to, and then we all have fun. But
that's where we build relationships that bring value to our lives, and so now I'm really hearing you share that where your analytical side came in. So being a non-emotional, you're not naturally just like you are analyzing. Okay, now it's time to ask you about your pictures. And it's invisible now, like you've clearly gained mastery. But when we're around people who are natural in that way, we get to take it on and learn from them. Because I mean, we all take on each other's imprints. We all condition each other when we're around each other. So I love the relationship you two have and how you can add value to each other that way. Yeah.
Well, the thing about it is that I also know that I can also remember the frustrations that used to come, right? Like where I was like, man, I just don't even know what to say. Like and that's really frustrating to me because I want to be able to like have a proper conversation with, and not even proper, like just a conversation where I'm not being awkward. But there was always definitely, because even now, like sometimes I go to parties just because like I know I'm going to build, like I'm going to network, but I really don't care to go there. I just want to, I'd rather go home and read and learn something new and work on my business a little bit more. Like that's always my preference. Like I always prefer to work on something. But then there's value in networking, right? There's a lot of value in networking. So you kind of get to do that as well. But I like to dance, so dancing. What's the dancing part on there? Is there a dancing channel on there? Because I love to dance. I don't know how to dance. I just shake my ass. Whatever.
Yeah, it's definitely a generator thing. We've got the physical energy. Yeah.
Whatever. Honestly, like this has been a lot of fun and learning about all this and also like seeing your passion for it has been totally great, right? Because it's like it feels like you found what you want to be doing. There's a deep connection with it. You've studied under the best people, and I think you're going to continue to study that. let me ask you, how can people find you? What's the next project you're working on? What are you excited to share with the listeners?
Okay, well, finding me, I'm a little not present on the socials, but I do have a Facebook account,
Nice.
Annie Yoder, and my website, thehumandesignstudio.com. And what I want to share is you can experience a lot of value in just knowing what your design is. So you can go online and look at Jovian Archive and pull up your chart, enter in your birth data, and it'll tell you, it'll give you the body graph, which you'll be like, what the hell is this? I don't know how to read this, but it will at least tell you what your type is, what your strategy is, what your inner authority is. And knowing how to make empowered decisions is for people who are interested in developing themselves, transforming themselves. Transforming the way you make decisions is what transforms your life. So that's a really great place to start for anyone who's interested in inquiring into their design.
So they go on into this
Jovian Archive.
JovianArchive.com. They get their thing. And then they should just reach out to you to be like, can you read this for me and help me understand that and coach with you, right? Like that would be the ultimate thing, right? Because then I think, honestly, like I said, there's one other person that had brought it up. Since then, there's been a lot of other people that have brought it up. To this day, you're still like the one that like broke it down the best for me. You're always like so excited to even talk about it in the first place. At parties, sometimes people go, "Hey, do you know your human design?" They bring you the phone and they do the thing, and they're like, "Oh yeah, like you're like a whatever," and then they just walk off. And then it's like, well, and we talked about the judgment thing. It almost feels like, "Oh yeah, like you're whatever, like you're probably like this and this and that," and they just walk off. And I was like, well, there should probably be more of a communication there, especially if you're trying to do some sort of business with it. It's like, because I can help you with that, and so I don't know, but please reach out to Annie here and learn more about it. It's actually been so great for me, and I can't wait to learn more about it. So
awesome!
Thank you so much
Thanks,
for coming.
Baldo.
That was fun and easy.
Super fun.
It went an hour.
Nice.
Yeah, I didn't even feel like it.
Not at all.
Oh man, I need to get you. It's very squeaky.
It sounds like someone's having sex or something.
It's the chair.
Is it the chair? It's like when I'm in my bedroom, I always hear, my neighbors above, like it sounds funny. Just like that.
That's hilarious.
Thank you so much for having me.
No, of course. I was looking forward to this. I wanted John to jump in here, but we were so busy the past couple of weeks.
Yeah.
And
I would love to pull up. It would be cool to do a reading for the two of you. But either way, I want to see his chart too.
What do you got going on the rest of the day?
I'm in a leadership course. I can't remember if I told you about it. Ascension Leadership Academy. It's a 6-month program, and I'm heading there next. So
that's cool.
We'll be in there the whole weekend.
What do you guys do there?
Raise the consciousness of humanity.
Okay.
This is.
But like, I guess what I really want is like, are you guys meditating?
It's a transformation program. Well, it's a leadership program, but an emotional intelligence program. So there's a lot of experiential discovery, breaking through, learning, reworking our weaknesses, doing exercises with a group. It's a very interactive format like that. So this is our first weekend of level 3, which goes for the next 90 days. And
how often do you meet?
We've had a full weekend about every 3 weeks, and then a few coaching calls during the week.
Okay.
Yeah.
Not too bad.
Yep. And I've got a friend who just flew in from Utah staying with me.
What do you have to do?
He's in the program.
Oh, I see.
Yeah. This is it's been cool. A lot of really high players are in this, and it's way beyond any personal development I've done. This is there's some star power in here.
Well, that's awesome.
Yeah, it's super cool.
So you get to pick people's brains as well.
Oh yeah.
What was I gonna say? Oh shit! Let me just stop this.